Imagine you're Shakespeare and the year is 1606. After years of actors being regarded as scum, you've finally built a theatre. And they haven't invented fire insurance yet, but it's not going to burn down for another 7 years. You've been invited to put on a play for the king. James is a relatively new king for England. He's been around for just 3 years. Already Guy Fawkes has tried to blow him up. He's known for being a bit obsessed with witchcraft. He's even written a book about it. It would be rude to write a play for him and not include some really stereotypical, bloodthirsty, interfering witches. The play you write is Macbeth. It's a play that functions on many levels. On one level it's a play about ambition, on another it's a play about murder. It's a play about evil, it's a play about guilt, it's a play about history, a play about politics. It's a play that's going to please this new Scottish king, because it's a play that works really well with witchcraft. So, the play opens with the witches, and they get a short scene that's practically a little prologue, all to themselves. Until they meet Macbeth in scene 3, they're basically just doing witch stuff, proving what stereotypical does what it says on the tin witches they are. They have familiars, like a pet but with added magic and creepiness. And honestly, before the days of CGI, it was hard to get live animals to behave predictably on stage. So it was easier to pretend that they were waiting just out of sight. The word Malkin doesn't get out much these days, but Shakespeare's audience would have known straight away that Graymalkin was a cat. Paddock was a name for a toad, which came from the Old Norse padda, probably a word the Vikings left lying around. And the third witch doesn't name her familiar in this scene. Anon isn't short for anonymous. It means soon, or I won't be long. In Act 4, Scene 1, she refers to it as Harpier. Harpies are half woman, half bird, so it's probably an owl, which makes up a nice trio of different familiars, one mammal, one amphibian, one bird, so it kind of represents land, water and air. 3 things that they say in this short scene are worth thinking about. When the battle's lost and won. They don't care who's doing the winning and who's doing the losing. The witches are not on anybody's side in this battle. They say that they are there to meet with Macbeth. Suggests they've got a meeting planned, even if nobody's actually put it in Macbeth's diary yet. And lastly, fair is foul and foul is fair. Their morality is completely back to front. Good is their evil, and evil is their good. And they finish with hover through the fog and filthy air, which suggests they can fly. And that ticks another box on the how to recognise a witch checklist. After a brief scene in camp with Duncan's army, where we learn that they've won the battle and Macbeth has been seriously useful to the king, we see the witches again. They carry on being stereotypically witchy while they wait for Macbeth to arrive. One says that she's been killing swine. Vets weren't really a thing in Shakespeare's day, so if your pig kicked the bucket, you were pretty sure the nearest witch had put the evil eye on it. It was also general knowledge that a witch would become your mortal enemy if you refused to give her food. So this sailor's wife was taking quite a risk refusing to share her chestnuts. The witch is planning to go after the woman's husband, and she's going to sail in a sieve, because witches could apparently do that. In a show of solidarity, the others offer to provide wind to blow her along, because of course weather was another area where witches had a reputation for interfering. You'd almost think Shakespeare had read King James's book. Anyway, Macbeth turns up, and the witches greet him as Thane of Glamis, which he is, as Thane of Cawdor, which he's about to be, and as Macbeth that shalt be king hereafter." Now, the witches get a lot of blame for putting ideas into Macbeth's head, but they never say a word about murder. He comes up with that all on his own, and very quickly too. It's only 70 lines till he talks about "my thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical." The idea of killing King Duncan really wasn't that far away from his mind all along. Every good leader needs a follower, and Banquo challenges the witches to look into his own future. There isn't a lot to see, because Banquo will be dead by the middle of Act 3, but Banquo's good news will outlive him. His descendants will be kings. Why will he be dead by the middle of Act 3? Well, this prophecy casts a bit of shade on Macbeth's, and having heard the witch's words to Macbeth, he really knows too much. It's really not Macbeth's best move, because it all really starts to fall apart for him once Banquo's dead, partly because being dead doesn't stop Banquo keeping his promise to come to the banquet. Macbeth becomes really quite paranoid. He knows that his reaction to Banquo's ghost has got a few more people thinking. Macduff didn't come to the feast, even if the ghost of Banquo did. And worst of all, Banquo's son survived the ambush that killed his father. Meanwhile, back on the heath, we meet a new character. Hecate, the goddess of magic, also known as the goddess of crossroads, gets a new role as the queen of our witches. She isn't impressed at being left out, and she isn't impressed with Macbeth, describing him as wayward, spiteful and wrathful. She seems to make the decision to bring him down, promising to harvest the magical juice of the moon for her dismal and fatal plans. Making Macbeth feel invulnerable seems to be her main tactic, one that she knows is universally dangerous to mortals. In Act 4, Scene 1, Macbeth deliberately goes looking for the witches. He wants to know that he's safe as king. Before he arrives, the witches remind us of their witchy credentials, cooking up a combination of traditionally magical and downright morally revolting ingredients in their cauldron. Hell broth really isn't a bad description. They seem to cooperate with Macbeth, agreeing to show him their masters, but each of those apparitions seems designed to work on Macbeth's psychology and the audience's by being ironically relevant to its message. The armed head tells him to beware Macduff, and the bloody child tells him that none of woman born shall harm him, and lastly, a child crowned and holding a tree tells him that he won't be defeated until Birnam Wood marches on the castle. As Hecate maybe knew he would, Macbeth hears what he wants to hear. He believes that the last two are impossible, that he is invulnerable. Now that he thinks he can't be held to account, his thoughts turn once again to murder as a way to solve his problems. So he sends killers to surprise Macduff's castle almost straight away. Ironically, this backfires, and it simply spurs Macduff on to revenge. And of course, the witches have left logical loopholes in their predictions. Macduff turns out to be a caesarean baby, so he wasn't technically born, and the invading army uses branches for camouflage, so the forest appears to be advancing on the castle. Whether or not the witches change Macbeth's future by revealing it the first time is hard to say, but the second time their intention is explicitly to destroy him, and they give him much more detail. Hecate's line about security being mortal's chiefest enemy makes it clear that she knows the effect their words will have. This intervention is deliberate. Although the play is complex, and Macbeth's character definitely helps to bring about his own downfall, it is clear that Shakespeare intended his witches to be evil and guilty of plotting against the king.